Everybody, today I've been asked to talk about the use of force and the use of force continuum. This is an excellent video whether you're a police officer, you're a security guard, or even a concealed weapons holder, and I think it's going to be very useful. So when I was a law enforcement officer, we had training on what you call a use of force continuum. And what they trained is they would always tell you to try to resolve a situation with the lowest amount of force possible given the situation. And a use of force continuum would always start with the officer's presence. Okay? That's the lowest level of force. When I first started as an officer with the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office, deputy sheriff, I had a sergeant. He was really old school. He was a military guy, and he always taught us that, you have your uniform pressed. You don't just take it out of the dryer all wrinkly, but you take it, have that pressed to the dry cleaners. Your boots better be shiny. He would make us spit shine our boots with black shoe polish, and we would typically put these boots in an oven, or we would take a lighter and light up and melt that wax that was on our boots and have those polished. Our brass on our uniform would be polished. We were encouraged to get a fresh haircut before we returned to work after 3 days off from work, and always to be assertive with people and stand up straight and make eye contact when we're talking with those people. Also, to have a good attitude with others when we're dealing with them, and to be aware of the danger signs of watching the hands when we were dealing with people. All of these principles can be used as a CCW holder as well. Because believe it or not, bad guys will size you up. If you're an easy, soft target for them, if they see that in you, they're more likely to mess with you. I currently work in the courthouse as the court bailiff, and sometimes I go on armed sites as a security officer. And you would be surprised how often an officer's presence works in de-escalating situations. There has been numerous times I have been in a courtroom and I observe a defendant at the podium speaking to a judge, and they become very belligerent with the judge after the judge has tried to explain something to them, and this person just won't stop being belligerent. And all it simply takes is I will simply walk over there and I will stand next to that person, not saying a word, and that will immediately calm that person down. Something very interesting too, I worked in patrol as an officer, and we would get a belligerent suspect that maybe he was non-compliant, and we were informing him when he was under arrest, and they were telling us such things as, "I'm not going to jail, screw you." And it would just take officers what we would call gloving up. And for those of law enforcement officers that are watching this, you know what this means. But while you're talking to the suspect and you're trying to do negotiations, you're doing this, you're gloving up. This right here would immediately de-escalate a situation, because that told that person we mean business, and we're getting ready to go hands-on with this person. So private persons, maybe you're not going to be gloving up and things like that, but just that appearance and you being assertive, and that might be something that you could use to de-escalate. Next on the force continuum would be verbal commands. For example, telling somebody to stop doing something. In this case, I would talk with them first and advise somebody to be civil, or that I'm going to ask them to leave. For example, in a courtroom setting, hey, if you don't stop doing this, I'm going to have to ask you to leave and escort you out of the courtroom. Rarely do I need to go beyond verbal commands when I'm dealing with a situation. Sometimes it happens, but not very much. For private persons, concealed weapons holders out there, this would apply too. You could simply tell somebody to move out of your personal space. Maybe they're up in your face and they're getting aggressive. You can tell them, hey, I need you to get back. You're in my personal space. Or maybe you're a bouncer at a bar, you're a security guard, and you're asking somebody to leave. Verbal commands. The next step would be soft, empty hand control of people or pain compliance. And this would apply to law enforcement officers and security guards. But I mean, it may apply to a CCW holder. Maybe you've got a trespasser on your property. And the police, they would train us with wrist and arm locks and things like that, and maybe applying pressure points on people to get pain compliance. They get combative with you, or if you're a private person and you don't have skills like a police officer would have, lethal options or intermediate weapons would be next appropriate when this soft, empty hands did not work or was not feasible. Pepper spray, tasers, batons, things like that. Those are intermediate weapons, and officers are trained to try to use these things before they resort to deadly force. If these intermediate weapons, less lethal options, do not work, then the last thing is the use of deadly force. And for private persons and concealed weapons holders, often after soft, empty hands does not work, you're at deadly force situation if you are following a use of force continuum. Now, I'm not saying a use of force continuum always needs to be followed. Sometimes you are escalating immediately upon contact with a deadly force situation. I'm just saying that, in my opinion, the state of Utah, at least for private persons, they are gearing towards and moving towards a necessary standard when private persons use deadly force versus the old reasonable standard, which is a much lower threshold of using force. It's very dangerous for private persons. I know that law enforcement officers, it's just my opinion, but over 30 years of being a peace officer, I've always felt like they train law enforcement officers under a necessary standard, and that's why they have this use of force continuum in place. And of course, when officers deploy force, whether that's deadly force or not, they are judged by a reasonable standard. And I think that's why you rarely see officers be formally charged for excessive use of force complaints, because they're trained in a mindset of force being necessary for those reasons. But then when they are examined by a prosecutor, the use of force is judged by a reasonable standard. So for those reasons, I think it's good for concealed carry folks to look at use of force through the lens of a necessary standard and try to have that mindset. And then, of course, if you get wrapped up into a situation, you're going to be judged, depending on what area you're in, by a reasonable standard. Anyway, I would also say if it's feasible for you to do so, I think it's not a bad idea to retreat from a situation, even though Utah, there's no duty to do so. And I'm not saying always do it. I'm just saying if it's feasible and it doesn't create more danger for you to do so, why not do it? Anyway, I hope this video was helpful. If you want me to do another video, please let me know. Thanks for watching.